Whump, whump, whump. The sound didn't start. It seeped in. A heavy, mechanical, percussive thumping. The sound of compressed air, of dust and grit being forced into flight. Jack's eyes flew open. No dust, no sand, just the water-stained acoustic tile ceiling of a roadside motel on Highway 61. The rust-colored carpet smelled like stale cigarettes and spilled beer. Outside, the red neon vacancy sign pulsed, throwing a sick, rhythmic light across the peeling, beige walls. He was on the floor. He didn't remember falling out of bed. The sound was still there. It wasn't outside. It was inside him. It was the catastrophic hammering of his own chest. A chill scraped down his spine. But the room wasn't cold. It was suffocating. He was a ghost haunting Room 9. A former military recon specialist, now trapped in a permanent holding pattern half a world away from the war. And then the demon came. It didn't have horns. It was a memory with weight and texture. It was the face of Private Evans, 19 years old, looking right at him just before the RPG hit. Jack's fault. Jack's call. Jack's mistake. The room began to shrink. The walls seemed to flex inwards. He reached for the bottle beside him, a cheap handle of 4 roses, but it was empty. He'd killed it last night, trying to drown that whump, whump, whump. Desperation. It wasn't an emotion. It was the air he was breathing. His breathing hitched, shallow and fast. Tunnel vision. The rotor wash in his head was now louder than the semis grinding by on the highway. He was going back. He was losing it. He clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms. Not now, not here. Just as he thought he would fracture, something warm and heavy pressed onto his chest. A soft woof of air. Bravo. Ederman, the 80-pound Belgian Malinois, a veteran in his own right, had moved from the corner of the room without a sound. Bravo wasn't a pet. He was a professional, a trained post-traumatic stress disorder service dog. The dog didn't lick his face. He didn't whine. He executed a trained maneuver. First, he applied his full weight to Jack's chest. Deep pressure therapy. It was a physical anchor, forcing Jack's nervous system to recognize that he was here, on a motel floor, and not there, in the Kandahar Valley. Jack was still hyperventilating. The rotors were too loud. Bravo initiated phase 2. He shoved his wet nose hard under Jack's chin, not a nudge but a forceful lift, snapping his head up. And then Jack saw it. Bravo's one remaining eye. The dog had lost the left in the same operation that had broken Jack. His right eye, a deep, intelligent amber, was locked onto him. Absolute focus. There was no pity in it, no fear. It was just present. It was giving an order. Look at me. Breathe with me. Jack stared into that single eye. He felt the weight. He smelled the fur. He focused on the dog's steady, even breath. Whump, whump, whump. The sound of the rotors faded. The hammering in his chest slowed to a heavy, painful beat. The wall stopped moving. The miracle had happened. Not from the heavens, but from another broken soldier who refused to let him surrender. Jack threaded his shaking fingers into the thick ruff of Bravo's neck. I know, buddy, he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. I'm here. He lay there for another minute, the cold floor seeping through his t-shirt. Bravo remained on duty, a warm weight on his chest. The silence in the motel room was now a relief. And that's when he saw it. It was on the cheap particle board desk by the door, partially obscured by an empty pizza box. A package. A medium-sized USPS priority mailbox. Jack didn't move. Ghosts don't get mail. He lived off-grid, in cash, moving every 6 months. No one knew he was here. Slowly, he pushed Bravo off his chest and rose to his feet. His body ached. The package was plastered in yellow forwarding stickers. Return to sender. Forwarding expired. Address unknown. It had taken a long, hard road to find him. The return address made his stomach clench. Emma Rourke. Mike. Mike Rourke. The only man from his old team who still tried to keep in touch. The only one who understood the demon. The man who had, according to official reports, vanished 6 months ago. Jack's recon instincts, buried deep under bourbon and guilt, began to stir. His hands, steady now, tore the packing tape away. There wasn't much inside. No letter, no explanation. Just 3 things. A single old-fashioned brass skeleton key. A faded Polaroid. Him and Mike, 2 kids in their 20s, grinning in their uniforms in front of a dilapidated farmhouse. The farmhouse that had been in Mike's family for generations. And a folded cocktail napkin. Inside, a frantic scribble in ballpoint pen. Trust no one, not even the badge. Jack stared at the words. Just then, his cheap burner phone, the one he kept for emergencies, vibrated on the desk. An unknown number. He flipped it open. Mr. Jack? A dry, reedy voice said. My name is Davis, from the law offices of Smith and Harbert. I'm calling regarding the estate of Mr. Michael Rourke. We've been trying to locate you for months. I'm afraid you're listed as the sole beneficiary. Jack looked down at the key in his hand, then out the dirty window at the anonymous ribbon of America speeding past. He didn't know it yet, but this was the first day of the rest of his life. The retreat was over. He had just been given an inheritance, or maybe he had just been given one last mission file. The click of the burner phone ending the call was louder than a gunshot in the stale $9 room. Silence. For the first time in 3 years, the whump, whump, whump in Jack's head was gone. It had been replaced by a different sound, a purpose. The lawyer's voice, dry and procedural, had been the ignition. Mr. Michael Rourke, listed as the sole beneficiary, accidental overdose. The words were a lie, a cheap, lazy lie. Mike Rourke didn't do accidental. Mike was the one who checked his gear 3 times. Mike was the one who could field strip a rifle in the dark, under fire, while telling a bad joke. Mike was the one who had pulled Jack out of that burning Humvee. Mike didn't do accidental. The demon of his PTSD wasn't gone. It was just sitting in the corner, watching him. It wanted him to stay. It wanted him to open another bottle, to let the lawyer's call fade into another regret. Jack looked at Bravo. The dog had been sitting at high alert, head cocked, since the phone first vibrated. He hadn't moved. He was waiting for a command. All right, Jack said. His voice was sandpaper. Load up. There was no suitcase to pack. There was only the olive drab duffel bag, still half packed from his last move, leaning in the corner. He swept the few items he owned into it. A spare shirt, 3 pairs of socks, a whetstone, a small first aid kit. He grabbed the last of his cash from the nightstand. Then he picked up the 3 items from Mike's package. The key, the Polaroid, the napkin. He didn't look at them. He shoved them into the breast pocket of his old M65 field jacket. They were his new map. He opened the door. The red vacancy light across the parking lot had finally burned itself out. Dawn was a bruised purple-gray smear on the horizon. His truck was a 1998 Ford Ranger. Its blue paint faded to a dull chalk, rust eating the wheel wells. It was the only thing, besides Bravo, that had been with him since he was discharged. The engine complained, sputtered, and then caught with a coughing roar. Bravo didn't wait to be told. He hopped into the passenger seat, not as a pet, but as a co-pilot. He sat upright, his one good eye scanning the perimeter, his nose already testing the morning air. Jack pulled out of the motel parking lot, leaving nothing behind but an empty room and a handful of cash on the table for the key he wouldn't be returning. He didn't look back. He merged onto the interstate. 4 hours of hypnotic, 6-lane highway, the world a blur of concrete and 18-wheelers. He drove with a grim efficiency, the mission-focused part of his brain, the part he thought was dead, taking over. He stopped only for gas. He didn't pay at the pump. He went inside. The gas station was a bright, sterile travel center in the middle of rural Illinois. Jack grabbed a black coffee and 2 pre-wrapped sandwiches. The kid at the counter, barely 18, was scrolling through his phone. Gonna be a hot one, the kid said, not looking up. Yeah, Jack replied, his eyes scanning the store. The security camera, the exits, the other customer, a trucker, staring blankly at the coffee machine. That your dog? The kid asked, finally noticing Bravo sitting like a statue in the truck. He's a service animal, Jack said, his tone flat. It was the line that ended conversations. He paid in cash. He ate his sandwich driving. Bravo ate his in 3 clean bites. After 4 hours, he exited the interstate. The roads narrowed. The broad, open plains of the Midwest gave way to the rolling, wooded hills of the Ozarks. State Highway 7. 2 lanes of cracked blacktop, winding through dense forests of oak and hickory. The towns got smaller. Dollar General stores and Baptist churches. Billboards for local lawyers and bail bonds. This was a different America. This was not the America of open highways. This was the America of long memories and closed doors. He was looking for Black Rock Valley, a place that barely registered on his GPS. The signal died 20 miles out. He was navigating by the sun in the worn paper map he kept in his glove compartment. He saw the sign, "Welcome to Black Rock Valley, Pop 832. The town was a single street carved into a crease in the hills, a feed store, a diner with a faded open sign, a combination post office and bait shop, and a small brick-faced sheriff's station. Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Not even the badge. He saw a deputy's car, a new Dodge Charger, parked in front. A deputy, young, with a military-style haircut, leaned against it, talking to a woman. He watched Jack's rusted Ranger roll past. His eyes were not friendly. They were assessing. Jack kept driving. He was an outsider. He was already on their radar. He turned off Main Street onto a county road. The asphalt gave way to gravel. The gravel gave way to a rutted dirt track that seemed more like a creek bed. The trees closed in, their branches forming a dense canopy that blocked the sun. The truck bucked and strained. Then the track opened up into a clearing. He stopped the truck. The engine ticked in the sudden, oppressive silence. The only other sound was the buzzing of cicadas. It was the house from the Polaroid, or it had been. The photo was a memory. The reality was a corpse. The farmhouse was collapsing in on itself. The front porch sagged, its roof caved in on one side. The white paint had been almost entirely scoured away by time, leaving behind silver, weather-beaten wood. Weeds, thick as a man's arm, choked what used to be a yard. This wasn't a home, it was a grave. Jack sat there for a full minute, the truck idling. The city-bred part of him, the part that still existed, wanted to put the truck in reverse and never look back. But the train sat. The recon specialist was looking at the terrain. He saw the high ground. He saw the single point of entry. He saw the overgrown woods that provided perfect cover. This wasn't just a derelict property. It was a defensible position. "Mike," he whispered, "what the hell were you doing out here?" Bravo didn't move, but a low, almost inaudible growl rumbled in his chest. He wasn't looking at the house. He was looking at the dark tree line, 100 yards to the west. He smelled something he didn't like. Jack killed the engine. He grabbed the tire iron from behind his seat. Not a weapon, just a tool. "Okay, buddy," Jack said, his voice quiet. "Let's go see the inheritance." He stepped out of the truck. The air was thick, humid, and smelled of pine and decay. He was here. He was on the X. The mission had begun. The silence of the clearing was a living thing. It was thick, watchful, and amplified by the high-frequency zzz of cicadas. Bravo's growl remained a low, subsonic vibration, a seismic warning aimed at the western tree line. Jack's eyes, trained to dissect landscapes, to find the man-made line in a natural world, found nothing. No glint of binocular glass. No flicker of unnatural movement. Just a wall of pine and dense, summer-green underbrush. But he trusted the dog. "Okay, flank me," Jack murmured. He didn't take the non-existent path. He moved from the cover of the rusted-out Ranger to the shadow of an ancient, dead oak, then to the shell of a 50s-era tractor. He moved the way he'd been taught, low, fast, using the broken terrain to mask his approach. Bravo mirrored him, a silent, dark shape gliding through the knee-high weeds. The tire iron was heavy in his right hand, held down against his forearm. It was a cold, poor substitute for his rifle, but it was solid steel. It helped. The front porch steps were a trap of rotted wood. Jack tested one with his boot. It cracked and splintered. He bypassed them entirely, grabbing the porch rail and hauling himself up onto the deck in one fluid, athletic motion. The front door was locked. He didn't bother with the key. The wood around the lock set was soft. He kicked it once, hard, a focused mule kick just beside the knob. The jam splintered like dry kindling, and the door groaned open, scraping against the warped floorboards. The smell hit him first: mildew, rat droppings, and the sweet, sickly sour scent of undisturbed decay. He stepped inside. Sunlight piercing through holes in the roof looked like solid beams in the dusty air. The place was a disaster. A stained, floral-patterned couch was on its back, its guts, yellow stuffing, pulled out. The kitchen table was overturned. Cabinet doors were ripped from their hinges. This wasn't neglect. This was a search, a violent, frantic sea-level search. The realization hit Jack like a physical blow. This wasn't an accidental overdose. This wasn't a missing person. Mike's property had been tossed. This was an op. "Bravo, clear," he commanded, his voice a low monotone. The dog swept the downstairs. Living room, kitchen, pantry, clear, clear, clear. Jack followed, his eyes cataloging the destruction. They had been thorough. They'd even ripped up sections of the cheap linoleum floor. He was about to head up the rickety stairs to check the second floor when he realized something was wrong. The house was too quiet. Bravo wasn't at his heel. A jolt, cold and sharp, shot through him. The whump, whump, whump of his pulse threatened to return. "Bravo!" He heard it then, a frantic, rhythmic scrabbling. Not from the woods, not from upstairs. It was coming from outside. He moved back through the broken doorway, vaulted the porch rail, and rounded the side of the house. The backyard was a jungle of weeds, dominated by a huge collapsing barn. Its main doors, built for a tractor, were off their tracks and hanging crookedly. Bravo was inside. Jack entered the barn. The air was dark, heavy, and smelled of old oil, hay, and damp earth. Rusted tools hung like skeletal remains on the walls. In the far corner, a pile of rotted pallets lay tossed aside. Bravo was digging. He wasn't sniffing. He was excavating, his powerful front paws tearing at the hard-packed dirt floor, sending clumps of earth flying. He stopped, let out a single high-pitched bark of pure frustration, and then went back to digging. "What is it?" Jack moved closer. The dog stopped instantly. He looked back at Jack, panting, his one good eye bright with an almost manic intensity. He barked again, a short, sharp, "Get over here" sound, and shoved his nose back into the shallow hole, sniffing at one specific spot. Jack knelt. He knew that bark. It wasn't a stranger bark or a threat bark. It was the alert he'd heard 100 times in training. It was the tell. "Back," Jack commanded. Bravo stepped aside, vibrating with energy. Jack looked at the spot. It was just dirt. But K9s were trained to find disturbances, disturbed earth, hidden chemicals, buried metal. He used the chisel end of the tire iron. The ground was compacted, hard as concrete. He broke it up, section by section. 4 inches down, the iron thunked against something solid, something that wasn't a rock. His heart rate climbed. He dropped the tool and dug with his bare hands, pulling away the hard-packed soil. It was metal, olive drab green, a standard issue .50 caliber ammunition can. He pulled the heavy box from its grave. It wasn't locked. He flipped the heavy steel latch, the metal shrieking in protest. He lifted the lid. His first thought was, this is what they were looking for. The box was full. On top, cash. Stacks of $100 bills bound in simple rubber bands. He didn't count it, but he knew the weight. Tens of thousands. Go-bag money. Bribe money. Disappear money. He lifted the bundles of cash out. Beneath them, a pistol. He recognized it instantly. A Soviet bloc Makarov. 9 Max Teeny. Compact, reliable, and utterly untraceable in the United States. Not Mike's issue weapon. This was a ghost gun, a tool for a dark job. Under the gun, there was one last item. A book. A black, Write in the Rain, all-weather logbook. The same kind of indestructible government-issue journal every recon team leader and sniper carried. Jack's breath caught in his throat. He opened the cover. It was Mike's handwriting. Tight, precise, economical. The first few entries were simple observations. Dates, times, baseline activity. John 14. Arrived Black Rock. Place hasn't changed. Colder. John 16. Deputy Haas, local SO, tailed me from the diner. Watched him for 2 hours. He's sloppy, but he's ex-MP. Knew I'd spot him. A warning? Jack felt a chill that had nothing to do with the damp barn. Mike wasn't hiding. He was hunting. He flipped deeper. The entries became more urgent, the handwriting tighter. Feb's 2. It's them. It's the same route, the same network. They're using the valley as a logistics cut-through. The sheriff is the gatekeeper. Brolin. How deep does it go? Feb 10. They made me. Not sure how. Haas? The girl at the diner? Doesn't matter. They tried the friendly warning. Sheriff Brolin himself. Smiled the whole time. Told me I looked unwell. Told me I should be careful. A man with your history. A man with your history. They were using Jack's own discharge, his own trauma, to discredit Mike. He turned to the last page. The writing was rushed, the pen strokes heavy. Feb 18. They're coming. I can't get out. Road is watched. Box is buried. The dog is smart. Jack, if you find this, it wasn't the past that got me. It was this. It's the same snake, Jack. The same snake from the valley. It's here. Trust no one. Not the badge. Get out. Get out. A twig snapped, 100 yards away in the woods. Jack froze. Bravo was already on his feet. A silent shadow aimed at the open barn door. The growl was back. But this time, it wasn't a warning. It was a threat. Jack slammed the logbook shut. He shoved the Makarov into the waistband at the small of his back. He swept the cash back into the ammo can and latched the lid. He could hear it now. An engine. A heavy-duty V8 idling slowly, coming up the long dirt track. It had the unmistakable diesel chatter of a police-issue truck. He looked at Bravo, whose good eye was locked on the sound. "Okay, Mike," Jack whispered, his voice hard as iron. "Mission received." He wasn't here to grieve. He was here to investigate a murder. And the welcome wagon had just arrived. The sound of the diesel engine wasn't a question. It was a statement. It was a heavy, low-idling growl, a predator announcing its territory. Jack didn't panic. Panic was a luxury. Panic was for the motel room. This was a tactical problem. He slammed the ammo can shut, the metal latch clicking into place with a sickening finality. He grabbed the Makarov from his waistband, checked the simple slide action, a round was chambered, and then shoved it back into the small of his back under his jacket. "Bravo, walk!" The command was a sharp whisper. The dog didn't bark. He spun, instantly silent, and took up a position just inside the dark mouth of the barn, his body oriented toward the sound, his head low, his one eye fixed. He was a living sensor system. Jack hoisted the ammo can. Too heavy to run with, too incriminating to leave. He moved to the deepest, darkest corner of the barn, behind a mountain of moldering hay bales and rotted pallets. He shoved the box deep into the debris, kicking loose straw over it. It wasn't a permanent solution. It was a 30-second fix. He wiped his hands on his jeans, grabbed the tire iron, and walked out of the barn, squinting into the oppressive brightness. The truck had cleared the tree line. It was a black Dodge Ram 2500, new with a lift kit, tinted windows, and an official sheriff's office star on the door. It parked, engine idling, blocking the only exit from the clearing. The driver's door opened. The man who stepped out was built like a retired linebacker. He wore the tan uniform of the county sheriff, but it was tailored, pressed. He had a full belt of gear, a holstered Sig Sauer, and a pair of mirrored aviator-style sunglasses that hid his eyes. He stood for a long moment, just watching. This was Sheriff Brolin. "Hello, the house," Brolin called out, his voice a folksy, unthreatening boom. "Sheriff's Department. Just a welcome wagon call." Jack emerged from the shadow of the barn. The tire iron held casually at his side, gripped down. He didn't approach. He stood his ground, 30 yards away. "That's far enough," Jack said. Brolin stopped, his head tilting. He was smiling. It was a politician's smile, all teeth, no warmth. "Well now, that's not very neighborly. I'm Sheriff Brolin, and you must be Mr. Jack, the inheritor." Jack just watched him. "My sincerest condolences about your friend Mike," Brolin said, taking another step. "It was a tragedy." "Tragedy," Jack repeated. The word was flat, lifeless. Brolin's smile tightened by a fraction. His eyes, hidden behind the shades, scanned everything. The rusted-out Ranger, the splintered, kicked-in front door of the farmhouse, the tire iron in Jack's hand. "That's quite a welcome mat," Brolin said, nodding at the broken door. "Place was like this when I got here," Jack said. "Was it now? Was it really?" Brolin rocked back on his heels. "A lot of vagrants pass through here. Dangerous. You know, your friend Mike, he was a troubled man. We tried to help him. But men like us, we see things. We carry things. Sometimes the load just gets too heavy." He was using Mike's logbook against him. He was using Jack's history against him. This wasn't a probe. This was an interrogation and a threat. "The lawyer said I had to sign for the property," Jack said, playing the part. The confused, broken vet. "Right, the lawyer." Brolin took a few more steps. Bravo chose that exact moment to emerge from the barn. He didn't make a sound. He simply appeared, a dark, muscled shadow at Jack's side, his good eye locked on the sheriff. Brolin stopped cold. The smile vanished. That is some dog you got there. He's a service animal, Jack said. Right. Brolin's hand, which had been near his belt, relaxed. He put the smile back on, but it was forced now. Look, son, I'm just here to tell you, this is a quiet community. We don't have much trouble, and we aim to keep it that way. If you're here to grieve, you do that. But if you're here to dig, he let the sentence hang. Well, the ground here is hard. Best to let things lie. He pulled a business card from his shirt pocket and held it out. Jack didn't move to take it. Brolin's arm stayed outstretched for an awkward second before he tossed the card onto the hood of the Ranger. You need anything, you call us, he said. His tone had changed. The welcome wagon was over. We're here to help. Don't make us come back out. He turned, got back in the high black truck, and reversed in a spray of gravel. He didn't turn around. He just backed the entire half-mile down the dirt track. His eyes, Jack was sure, never leaving the farmhouse. The fog of PTSD, the constant dulling static that had ruled Jack's life, was gone. It had been burned away by a single, sharp jolt of pure adrenaline. He was no longer a victim. He was a target. And a target fights back. He and Bravo waited until the sound of the diesel faded. Then he retrieved the ammo can. Night. Black Rock Valley was dead by 10 p.m. The diner's open sign was dark. The feed store was locked. The only lights were the yellow street lamps on Main Street and the blue-white 24-hour hum of the sheriff's station. Jack was not in the farmhouse. The farmhouse was a compromised, indefensible position. A kill box. He and Bravo were on a ridge, 200 yards above the town, concealed in a thicket of scrub pine. He'd spent the last 4 hours clearing his back trail, stashing the ammo can in a new, more secure cache, and establishing this observation post. The recon specialist was awake. He lay prone, his M65 jacket blending into the dark earth. He had Mike's old, cheap binoculars from the truck's glove box. He wasn't looking at the town. He was establishing a baseline. At 22:30, one deputy's car patrolled Main Street, slow. At 22:45, a local barfly stumbled out of the town's one tavern and went home. At 23 Refaz, the streetlights hummed. At 01 Wars, all was quiet. The town was asleep. The baseline was established. Now he waited for the anomaly. It came at 02:17. The back door of the sheriff's station, a figure. Jack focused the binoculars. Deputy Haas, not in uniform. He got into his personal Ford F-150 and drove. Not home, but to the closed diner. He parked. He didn't get out. Ping, anomaly 1. At 02:22, a nondescript refrigerated truck, a reefer, rumbled into town. It didn't stop on Main Street. It turned down the dark alley behind the diner. Ping, anomaly 2. Bravo, Blybe, stay. Jack moved. He was a shadow flowing down the ridge, using drainage ditches and overgrown property lines. He crossed Main Street in 3 seconds, a ghost in the dark. Bravo was at his heel, silent as smoke. He found a position behind a stack of empty kegs in the diner's back lot. He had a clear view. Sheriff Brolin's personal truck was already there, parked in the darkest shadow. Brolin himself stepped out. He wasn't in uniform. He was the gatekeeper. Haas got out of his truck and met the reefer's driver. They spoke for a moment. The driver handed Haas a heavy manila envelope. Haas took it, nodded, and then, inexplicably, he sliced open the truck's rear latch. He didn't check cargo. He added cargo. 2 men from Brolin's truck, men Jack hadn't seen, loaded 2 heavy military-style duffel bags onto the reefer. This wasn't a toll booth. This was a hub. Brolin clapped the driver on the shoulder. The driver got back in the cab, sealed the truck, and rumbled out of the alley, heading east. Haas got back in his F-150 and drove home. Brolin and his 2 men got in their truck and vanished to the west. The entire exchange took less than 3 minutes. It was professional, it was clean, it was terrifyingly routine. Jack stayed in the shadows, his heart a cold, hard knot. Mike's logbook was a prologue. This was the story, and he had just inserted himself into the middle of it. The farmhouse was a tomb. Jack moved through the splintered doorway at 03:30, the dead hour. He didn't turn on a light. He didn't need one. He'd spent 3 years living in the dark. He shoved the overturned floral-patterned couch in front of the broken door. It was a pathetic defense, a child's barricade. But it was something. He needed to think. He needed to process what he'd seen. The reefer truck, the duffels, the casual, almost bored professionalism of Brolin and Haas. He sat at the ruined kitchen table, the one still standing. Bravo, sensing his master's tension, didn't lie down. He sat at Jack's feet, a silent, coiled spring, his good eye scanning the darkness. Jack placed the three items from his pocket onto the table's gritty surface. The Polaroid, the key, the napkin. Trust no one, not even the badge. He took the Makarov from his waistband, laid it on the table, and finally opened Mike's logbook. He clicked on his small, pen-sized flashlight, shielding the beam with his hand. He wasn't reading for story anymore. He was reading for data. He cross-referenced the dates. Mike had been watching them for 6 weeks. He'd recorded the reefer truck's arrival schedule. Always a Tuesday or a Thursday, always between 02 Wersier and 02:30. Jack had just gotten lucky. He flipped past the local observations looking for a name. He found it. Brolin. John 28. Brolin is not a local. Ran his name. He's not just some good old boy sheriff. He's ex-first SFAD, Delta. Got out in '09. Went private. K Global Logistics, Afghanistan. 2010-2012. The penlight beam shook. K Global. The air left Jack's lungs. The whoomp, whoomp, whoomp wasn't a helicopter. It was a C-130 landing at Bagram. K Global, the shadow company, the private contractors who ran the logistics for his sector, the ones who had supplied the vetted intel for his last patrol, the intel that sent his team, Evans, Diaz, and Kowalski, into a three-sided high-angle ambush. He saw it. The bad intel, the RPG, the smoke, the screaming. No, he whispered, shutting his eyes. He forced them open. He read the next line in Mike's logbook. Feb 11, it's them, Jack. It has to be. The same route, the same network. They didn't stop when the war ended. They just moved the operation stateside. They're using the valley. A logistics cut-through for... what? I don't know yet, but it's the same snake. The horrifying truth landed on Jack with a physical weight. Mike hadn't stumbled onto a local drug ring. He had uncovered the same corruption that had destroyed Jack's life. This wasn't a new war. It was the old war. Come home. And the pain, the turning point, it wasn't just discovery, it was guilt. Mike hadn't died investigating. He had died trying to find the truth for Jack. He was trying to prove that Jack's mistake wasn't a mistake. It was a setup, and it had gotten him killed. Jack felt a tear trace a path through the grime on his cheek. He wiped it away, angry. Bravo stood up. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He just stood, his body rigid, his head oriented toward the dark, gaping hole where the front door used to be. Jack was already moving. He killed the penlight. He grabbed the Makarov, his thumb sweeping the sticky, crude safety off. He heard it, not a diesel truck, not a car. He heard the crunch of gravel, a footstep, a professional, heel-to-toe roll designed to minimize sound. But on a gravel driveway, it was a siren's wail to a man like Jack. He and Bravo moved as one, melting back from the kitchen into the central dark hallway. They weren't coming to talk. They weren't coming to warn him. They had let him see the exchange at the diner, or they knew he had. It didn't matter. He had seen it. He had the logbook. He was a loose end. A sudden blinding white beam of a spotlight hit the farmhouse. The light, a million candle power, sliced through the windows, vaporizing the shadows, turning the interior into a stark, overexposed stage. Jack flattened himself against the wall, his eyes squeezed shut, spots dancing. A voice, amplified by a bullhorn, boomed across the clearing. It wasn't the folksy, welcome wagon Brolin. This was the Delta Brolin. John Riley, this is Sheriff Brolin. We know you're in there, son. We have the property surrounded. Jack crept to a side window. Bravo, a shadow at his knee. He peeked through a crack in the frame. Two men, not Haas, not local deputies, dressed in black tactical gear, no markings. They were moving up the flanks of the house, using the dead tractor and the oak tree for cover. They moved with the same low, predatory grace that Jack knew. They were operators. You're confused, Jack, Brolin's voice boomed again. You're trespassing on a compromised property. We know you're not well. We know about your history. We're here to help. The manipulation, the painful twist. Jack saw it all in a sickening flash. They weren't just here to kill him. They were here to build the story. The crazy, violent vet, the tragic suicide by cop. They would find Mike's logbook, the ravings of another crazy vet, and they would find Jack's body and the story would be sealed. Trust no one. You have 10 seconds to come out, unarmed, Brolin shouted. Jack didn't have 10 seconds. He grabbed Bravo by the ruff. Back, back, he hissed, pulling him toward the rear pantry. The operators were at the door. This wasn't a siege, it was an execution. Bravo's therapy training was gone. His K9C combat training had taken its place. His lips were peeled back from his teeth in a silent, terrifying snarl. Last chance, Jack. Don't make us do this. Jack knew with absolute certainty that Brolin was hoping he wouldn't come out. He heard a thump hiss sound. Gas, Jack yelled, more to himself than the dog. A CS gas canister smashed through the kitchen window, bounced off the linoleum, and began to spew a thick, choking cloud. The house was untenable. The front was a fatal funnel. The windows were lit. The only way out was through. The gas hit Jack's lungs. It was fire. He choked, his eyes streaming. Bravo let out a painful yelp, sneezing and backing away, his superior senses overloaded. Jack kicked open the flimsy pantry door that led to the backyard jungle. Bravo, dirt, through. It was a command of desperation. Jack exploded out of the door, not as a man, but as a projectile. He didn't run. He fled, the Makarov in his hand, a choked sob and a gasp of burning air in his throat. He heard a shout, back door, back door. A shot cracked through the night, the bullet snapping past his ear. He didn't stop. He dove shoulder first into the chest-high weeds, pulling Bravo down with him. The hunt was on. He wasn't a victim anymore. He was prey. CS gas is a bastard. It doesn't just burn your lungs. It boils your synapses. It's a chemical command to panic. Jack scrambled into the black woods, half blind, dragging air and liquid fire into his chest. Bravo was a thrashing, coughing shadow beside him, his senses betrayed. Crack snap! A bullet tore through the leaves where Jack's head had been. A second shot. They weren't trying to wound him. He dove behind a cluster of wet, moss-covered boulders, pulling Bravo down. He wiped his streaming eyes on his sleeve, his vision a useless smear of tears. He was compromised. He was exposed. And they were coming. He heard them moving in the woods. 2 of them. Moving in a classic flanking pattern. Thump, thump, thump. Not heavy steps, but the disciplined, measured advance of men who own the night. He saw a flicker of green light. Night vision goggles, NVGs. The sight of that unnatural phosphorescent green cutting through the dark was the final key. The gas, the gunfire, the green-lit pursuit. The woods of Black Rock Valley dissolved. He was back. The whump, whump, whump returned, louder than it had ever been. It was the sound of the Black Hawk, leaving them in the dust. He was on the ground in the Korangal PFC. Evans was screaming, and the green tracers were coming down, not up. He was paralyzed. The demon had him. He pressed his back against the rock, his eyes shut, the Makarov useless in his trembling hand. He was going to die here, just as he should have died there. He was lost. A new pain, sharp and immediate, sliced through the memory. Bravo! The dog, his own lungs still raw, had jammed his nose hard under Jack's chin, forcing his head up. But this wasn't the gentle, therapeutic pressure from the motel. Jack was unresponsive, so Bravo escalated. He snapped his jaws, his teeth clicking, inches from Jack's ear. It was a shock, a violation of their bond. It was the K9C combat equivalent of a drill sergeant slapping a hysterical private. Wake up, soldier. Jack's eyes flew open. He wasn't in Kandahar. He was in Missouri. The man hunting him wasn't an insurgent. He was a corrupt American operator. And the snake that had killed Mike was the same one that had set him up. The fear vanished. The whump, whump, whump went silent. All that remained was a cold, pure, crystalline rage. He was no longer prey. He was a treen sat, and they had made the fatal mistake of following him into his office. Okay, buddy, Jack whispered, his voice a raw rasp. Hunt. He didn't run. He flowed, using the sound of a nearby creek to mask his movement. He left the operators his back trail, then doubled back in a wide, silent semicircle. They had the tech. He had the ground. He found the first operator. The man was silhouetted by the moonlight, his NVGs giving him an alien, insect-like profile. He was scanning the creek bed, exactly where Jack had wanted him to look. Jack came from above, dropping from a low-hanging oak branch. It wasn't a fight. It was a removal. He landed on the man's back, one hand covering the man's mouth and nose, the other driving the steel butt of the Makarov into the base of his skull. The man went limp. Jack eased him to the ground, taking his radio. Alpha 1, sit rep, a voice crackled in the earpiece. It was Brolin, impatient. Jack didn't answer. He found the second operator, 50 yards to the east, moving toward the sound of the first man's fall. Alpha 2, respond, the radio hissed. He's here, Jack said into the radio, his voice a low, distorted whisper. By the creek. He's hit. He tossed the radio into the underbrush. Alpha 2, hearing his partner was down, abandoned his discipline. He ran. He ran right past the deep, hollowed-out root system of a fallen sycamore tree. Jack emerged from that hollow like a ghost. This was a fight. The operator was fast, swinging his rifle around. Jack went inside the weapon's arc, driving his shoulder into the man's chest. They went down, a tangle of limbs. The operator was strong, but Jack was fueled by 3 years of suppressed fury. He broke the man's wrist, then used his own tactical gear to choke him unconscious. 2 down, 1 to go. Jack walked back into the clearing. He was covered in mud, his jacket torn, his eyes still red from the gas. But he was whole. Sheriff Brolin was standing by his black Ram truck, his uniform immaculate, his face lit by the high beams. He saw Jack emerge, alone, and his politician's smile returned. Well, damn, son, Brolin said, his hand resting casually on his holstered pistol. You are full of surprises. My boys, they're expensive. I'm going to have to take that out of your inheritance. They're alive, Jack said, his voice flat. He stopped 20 yards away. The Makarov was gone, tucked back in his waistband. That's a shame. Makes the paperwork messy, Brolin sighed. But I suppose it doesn't matter. The story's already written. Troubled vet, suffering from delusions, confronts local police, is tragically killed after attacking the sheriff. K Global Logistics, Jack said. Brolin's smile didn't falter, but his eyes went dead. Afghanistan, 2011. You sold bad intel to a Marine recon unit, Jack continued, his voice void of emotion. A mistake that rerouted a rival smuggling convoy and got 3 of my men killed. But the snake got sloppy. Mike found the connection. He found the route. He found you. You and that burnout, Mike. You have no idea what you're talking about, Brolin said, his hand unclipping his holster. He was digging for me, Jack said. He died trying to clear my name, and you're going to pay for it. And who are you going to tell, Jack? Brolin laughed. You're a ghost. You're a liability. Your word against a decorated sheriff? It's over. It is, Jack agreed. He held up his cheap burner phone. The record icon was glowing red. I sent the full audio file and the last 3 pages of Mike's log to the state police 30 minutes ago. It's a dead man's switch. If I don't call them back in 5 minutes, they hit send to the feds. Your whole house of cards, Brolin. K Global, everything. Brolin's face collapsed. The arrogance, the control, all of it vanished, replaced by the sheer panic of a trapped animal. He drew his weapon. I'll just take the phone. He never saw Bravo. The dog, who had been circling in the absolute darkness of the barn, launched himself across the clearing. No bark, no warning. Just 80 pounds of trained, loyal to the death muscle. Bravo hit Brolin in the chest like a fur-covered cannonball. The gun fired once, the shot going wild into the night. Brolin screamed as Bravo's jaws found their mark, locking onto the arm that held the gun. Jack walked forward calmly, picked up the skittering pistol, and pointed it at the screaming, writhing man. He didn't need to use it. In the far distance, he heard them. Sirens, multiple, coming fast. Dawn. Jack sat on the sagging porch of the farmhouse. The air smelled like pine and morning dew. The CS gas long since dissipated. The clearing was a circus of blue and red lights. State police. Forensics. Brolin was gone. The operators were gone. The snake wasn't dead, but its head in Black Rock Valley had been cut off. A state trooper, a woman with tired eyes, handed Jack a bottle of water. You've been through hell, Mr. Jack. We all have, Jack said. What will you do now, she asked. Jack looked at the ruined house. Mike's house. His house. I'm going to fix the porch, he said. He hadn't been cured. There was no magic bullet for the wump, wump, wump. But as he sat there, watching the sun crest the trees, He realized it was quiet. The demon in his head, the guilt he had carried for 3 years, was finally silent. He had faced the source. He had finished the mission. Bravo limped onto the porch, his flank grazed by a splinter from the doorframe, and laid his heavy head on Jack's knee. Jack scrubbed the dog's ears, his gaze fixed on the rising sun. "Good boy, Bravo," he whispered. "We're home." The first sound of the morning was no longer a whump, whump, whump. It was a thwack, thwack, thwack. 4 months had passed. The humid, oppressive green of the Missouri summer had bled into the sharp, cold, honest blue of late November. The trees in the valley were bare, a skeletal charcoal drawing against a steel-gray sky. The thwack was the sound of a hammer striking a 16-penny nail. Jack was on the porch he had told the state trooper he was going to fix. It was the first promise he'd made to his new life, and he was keeping it. He was not the same man. The ghost who had stumbled into Black Rock Valley was gone. This man was solid. The gaunt, haunted look had been replaced by the lean, hard-earned muscle of physical labor. He wore a red plaid flannel, not his old M65 jacket. Sawdust, not dust from an Afghan pass, clung to his jeans. The house was not the same house. It was no longer a tomb. It was a project. The splintered, kicked-in door was gone, replaced by a heavy, solid oak door he'd bought with the first check from a part-time job he'd taken at the feed store in the next town over. The windows, shattered by the gas canister in the spotlight, were now new, double-pane glass. The bullet holes in the living room wall had been cut out, the drywall patched, sanded, and painted. The house, like him, would always bear the scars. The floorboards were still stained. The wood was still warped. But it was no longer a wound. It was a structure. The town of Black Rock Valley was not the same town. The fall of Sheriff Brolin and his shadow network had been a quiet earthquake. The feds, or as the locals called them, had been there for a month, silent men in dark suits asking questions. The Black Rock Gazette, a 2-page weekly, had called it the Long Night's Close. Jack was a local curiosity. He was not a hero. He was the man who had, as the town saw it, brought the storm and ended it. They treated him with a cautious, respectful distance. The new deputy, a young man named Hilliard, drove by the farm track every Tuesday. He didn't stop. He just raised 2 fingers from his steering wheel in a quiet, "Howdy." Jack, in turn, would lift his chin in a silent nod. It was an unspoken truce. "I'll leave you alone if you leave me alone." Bravo was not the same dog. He lay on the new porch, not at guard in a rigid, tactical sit, but splayed out on his side, his belly soaking up the weak November sun. The bullet that had grazed his flank on the long night had healed, leaving a patch of white, puckered skin. He was, for the first time in his life, just a dog. He was not a weapon. He was not a therapist. He was a companion. He no longer slept at the foot of the door on watch. He slept on a ratty old couch they'd salvaged, his legs twitching as he dreamed of rabbits, not men. The silence was broken by a sound from the county road. A sharp crack, crack. A truck backfiring. Jack's hand, the one holding the hammer, stopped mid-swing. His shoulders went rigid. His head snapped toward the sound. The air was suddenly cold. The whump, whump, whump was there. Distant. A phantom limb itching. He was back in the motel room. He was back in the convoy. No. He felt a wet nose pressed gently into his open palm. Jack looked down. Bravo hadn't jumped up. He hadn't gone on alert. He had simply noticed. He'd seen his master flinch, had gotten to his feet, and walked over to perform his new duty. He was the anchor. Jack let the hammer hang. He dropped to one knee and buried his face in the dog's thick ruff. He smelled like pine, sawdust, and dog. He was real. "I'm here, buddy," Jack whispered, the words that Bravo used to give to him. "I'm here. I'm okay." He took a breath. The sound of the rotors was gone. There was only the sound of the wind in the bare oak trees. The demon hadn't been vanquished. It never would be. PTSD wasn't a war you won. It was a truce you negotiated every single day. And today, Jack had won the negotiation. He went back to work. He finished the last rail of the porch as the sun began to dip, painting the valley in shades of bruised orange and purple. He put his tools away. He went inside and found the one thing he hadn't yet dealt with, the ammo can. The cash was gone, turned over to the feds, untraceable evidence of criminal enterprise. The Makarov was gone, but Mike's logbook was still there, sitting on the new kitchen counter. Jack picked it up. He had read it cover to cover a dozen times. He had memorized the last entry. Get out. He walked back outside, the logbook in his hand. He went to the rusted-out burn barrel at the edge of the property. He opened the book, tore out the last page, the one with Mike's final, desperate warning, and folded it, putting it in his wallet. The rest of the book, he dropped into the barrel. He splashed it with lighter fluid and tossed a match. He wasn't burning the evidence. He was freeing his friend. He watched the smoke rise, a thin gray ribbon against the twilight. "It's done, Mike," he said to the quiet. "It's done. You can stand down." He turned and walked back to the house. Bravo was waiting on the porch. The light clicked on in the kitchen. For the first time in his adult life, John Riley was not a soldier. He was not a ghost. He was just a man, home from work, about to make dinner for his dog. Thank you so much for following the story of Jack and Bravo to its conclusion. Writing about survivors and the quiet, difficult road to peace is a story I feel deeply. Now I have a question for you, the audience. In the end, do you believe it was Jack who saved Bravo from his past as a weapon? Or was it Bravo who truly saved Jack from his?